US President Donald Trump has announced 25% tariff on India, whom he called a US friend. Trump, in fact, took to Truth Social and said, and I quote him, "Over the years, we have done relatively little business with them because their tariffs are far too high, among the highest in the world, and they have the most strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country," unquote. Trump had earlier hinted at a 20 to 25% tariff on India, and the final levy was still not finalized as the two countries, remember, are in the middle of negotiations ahead of the August 1st deadline. Hours later, he announced a 25% tariff plus a penalty. The president's comment came ahead of the deadline when a slew of reciprocal tariffs is set to take effect. Let's first listen in to what Donald Trump said.
India is preparing to face higher U.S. tariffs between 20 and 25%. Is that what you're tracking, or what do you think the rate will be for India?
That they are going to pay 25%.
Yeah, that India is preparing to face higher U.S. tariffs between 20 and 25%.
Yeah, I think so. Look, they're my friends, and he's my friend. And, you know, they ended the war with Pakistan at my request, and that was great. And Pakistan did also. India's been a good friend, but India has charged basically more tariffs than almost any other country. You know that, right? Over the years. But now I'm in charge, and you just can't do it.
The Indian government a little while ago gave first response to Trump's tariff announcement, saying that it is studying its implications. The government added that India and the US have been engaged in negotiations on concluding a fair, balanced and mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreement over the last few months. We remain committed to that objective. The government has also said that it will take all steps necessary to secure our national interests, as has been the case with other trade agreements, including the latest comprehensive economic and trade agreement with the UK. Let me bring in Surjit Bhalla first. Dr. Bhalla is an economist and former executive director of IMF for India, Bangladesh, Bhutan and Sri Lanka. Dr. Bhalla, one would say that that's how countries negotiate. Even while the deal is on, the negotiations are on, for Donald Trump to use the harshest of words and put it out on social media, is that what India is dealing with? Is this some kind of maneuvering or blackmailing? What exactly is it? Or some kind of pressure tactics?
No, I wouldn't use the term blackmail at all. Maneuvering, definitely. That's what negotiators do. But, you know, what we need to recognize is what Trump is saying, and I've said this before on your channel, is absolutely correct. We have the highest tariff rates in the world. And it's not just me. You ask any Indian economist, not the government bureaucrats, but any Indian economist, as to whether we have the highest tariff rates in the world. We do. Second, as I have stated, and many others have stated, negotiating with the US for lower tariffs is in India's best interest. Don't do it because Trump wants you to do it. Do it because it is in your interest to do it. And we haven't done that. And, you know, last point I want to make, we thought that there would be a difference because of the close relationship of Modi with Mr. Trump, and the changed fortunes of India under Prime Minister Modi, that we would have the courage and the mindset to reform. But we haven't. There is no difference between what the Congress has been saying all along, vis-a-vis trade deals, etc., and what Mr. Modi's BJP is saying. So what's the difference? Again, I conclude by saying it is in our own personal interest that we reduce the tariffs. And we haven't done so. It doesn't appear that we have done so as yet.
Dr. Bhalla, Another aspect of this announcement on Truth Social, which came from Donald Trump, was of penalties. So my question is, can the US unilaterally impose penalty tariffs for India's purchase of Russian military and energy goods under existing trade rules, or does this really violate WTO norms?
You know, this keeps coming up. That's a very good question. Does it violate WTO norms? You know, the two biggest trading partners in the world, not necessarily partners, the two biggest trading nations in the world are US and China. And they have continuously violated WTO rules. You see the fact, basically, which WTO rules allow you to export to another country, like China does to Vietnam, and for Vietnam to go and send it to the US under the stamp of China, of Vietnam. So let us not have that crutch that we are playing by the rules when nobody else does, and especially not the two biggest trading nations in the world.
And would you say that this announcement also reflects some kind of personal frustration with India's trade policies from Trump's first term, or a broader Republican shift away from viewing India as a strategic partner?
Look, as I keep saying, this has, if you will, nothing to do with Trump or the Republicans or their relationship with India. We are our worst enemy. We have imposed this on ourselves, and it's about time we realized that it's in our own interest to do this. I don't care whether it is, let's take the example of the UK. We have reached a trade deal with the UK. Well, the trade deal with the UK had nothing on BITs, the bilateral investment treaties. That's been postponed. We keep postponing. So this is what we've been doing. We've had 3 months or 4 months or 5 months to negotiate with the US, and we are at exactly the same place as we were 5 months ago. So what have we negotiated? And last, one of the items of disagreement between the US and India are farm tariffs. Now, the Supreme Court, after the farm laws failed, after the farm laws were withdrawn, the Supreme Court ordered a survey of farmers in India as to how many of them would be in favor of the farm laws. 87% of Indian farmers are in favor of farm laws. So why are we catering to the 13%, the big guys with the deep state, the bureaucrats who control farm policy, and the industrialists who control farm policy? Why aren't we in favor of the farmers? 87%. So therefore, it is us. Please, I plead with India, and I've pleaded with Indian officials and everybody. It is our problem. Don't blame it on Trump, or don't blame it on nationalism, or whatever your interest might be.
All right, Dr. Surjit Bhalla, really appreciate your time. Let me bring in Ajay Dua, former Commerce Secretary of India. Gurcharan Das is an economist. Anjali Prasad is India's former ambassador to the World Trade Organization. We have Ambassador Sajanhar joining us as well. Ms. Prasad, I'm going to begin with you, because lots being said about this kind of announcement and also penalty which has been announced. So the question that I asked Mr. Bhalla, as someone who has worked at the WTO, does this actually violate WTO norms?
Thank you for having me on your show, Maria. First of all, may I say that I am a bureaucrat. I was a bureaucrat. So, I am also trained in economics. Now, if I were to answer your question in one word, it is yes. It violates all principles and norms of the multilateral trading system. You cannot unilaterally alter your tariff, impose such tariffs on any member country. That is one. Secondly, this penalty. What is this penalty? We don't understand until we actually see it in black and white. Penalty tariffs, there is nothing like penalty tariffs. You impose certain duties when you violate certain provisions of the WTO, like safeguards, anti-dumping, things like that. But to impose duties just because, in your opinion, a country has so-called high tariffs, and then impose certain so-called penalties, rather, is something that is completely ultra-vires the WTO rules.
All right, thank you for putting that in context for our viewers. Ajay Dua, let's get into specifics now, because there's a lot of concern about the sectors. What specific Indian goods or sectors will be hit by this 25% tariff, and how might this impact bilateral trade volumes between US and India?
Maria, as you know, India's exports to the US are about $86 billion. As against it, our imports from there are much less, at about 45 billion, giving a trade deficit of 41 billion in our favor. So we have a trade surplus. The US's concern has been that this persisting trade imbalance between India and the US needed to be corrected. India should be importing more goods from the US. So we have in the past, I'm giving this background, we have in the past made conscious efforts to bridge this gap. If you include the services imports from the US, what the gap I mentioned was in the merchandise exports, a merchandise trade, including royalties, services, and the arms which we get from the US. If you include that, the surplus is already in favor of the US. It is a trade balance clearly of all the goods and services, then the US is not badly off. Having said that, I'll also like to point out that the average tariff, which President Trump talks about so loudly and so frequently, that India is the highest tariff country in the world, the average tariff of the goods which we import from the US, and that includes his favorite Harley-Davidson motorbikes, about which so much has been said in the last 20 years, is 13.2%. The difference and what the US levies on our exports is about 3.2%. So there is a differential of 10%. Okay. But that's not unprecedented in world trade. I did hear Dr. Surjit Bhalla talk about it and say that India is a highly taxed country, etc. All that's very fine. I wanted to just put it in with facts and figures. The differential at 13.2%, we look good. It does look considerable, but it is not humongous considering that our trade with the US is limited to $129 billion.
Okay.
Second point I'd like to make is that the goods which you asked me about,
yes,
what could get hit is we export a lot of gems and jewelry items to the US. That's probably one of our largest items. A second large item is automobiles and the components. We also export, actually, in the top 10 items which are there, we also figures petroleum. We are a large exporter because of our low cost of refining to US, China, as well as Netherlands, a large exporter of petroleum. We refine it. Some of our biggest refineries do that. Okay. And that was added in our figure for 86.5%, 5 billion, and also we are an exporter of pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
In addition, textiles and tea, our traditional exports, also have a fairly large presence in our figure of 86 billion. So all of these, there is a certain duty already there. 10% was levied across the board on all the items by President Trump as soon as his second term started. So is the differential going to be only 15%,
Okay.
or is this 25% over and above the 10% which was there? That's yet to be clarified. And finally, I think that while negotiations are underway,
Yes.
5 rounds of negotiations have been held. If we are able to enter into a bilateral trade agreement in the next few days, I think the burden of this higher rate of duty of 25%, which is coming for geopolitical reasons rather than whatever President Trump might have said about it being highly.
Gurcharan Das, a response from you, and then I'll speak to Ambassador Sajjanhar with regards to the strategic autonomy. Please go ahead. Gurcharan Das.
India's number one priority is jobs.
Yes.
45% of our working population is on the farm, and only half of that is needed. And so therefore half is redundant. And the problem is that we have failed to create an industrial revolution. And to do so, we have to export. No nation became a middle-class nation from a poor nation without exports. So therefore, the best examples were the Asian countries, the Asian tigers who become middle-class countries. And they did it through labor-intensive manufactured exports to the United States primarily. So therefore, our tariffs need to be competitive to the East Asian, to the ASEAN countries in particular, and countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, whose tariffs are 20 and 19%. So we will be disadvantaged, and if this goes through, this is bad news. Even the great Apple story that we are in the midst of, the iPhones, is threatened now with this. So the point for India is, Surjit is absolutely right. It's in our own interest to do this, to join up with the global value chains. And so the attitude today is still the attitude of the past, and we have to look to the future. And therefore, I would say that this is bad news. I would hope that our trade agreement we should put some priority and energy and urgency to the trade negotiations, because frankly, India needs the United States. So it's in our own interest to look to the future. And therefore, I think that really if this goes through, this is bad news for India. We are giving up our future if we allow this kind. And it is, as Surjit pointed out, it's our fault that we are in this situation. And so let's do what is in our own interest.
Okay. Ambassador Sajjanhar, how do you think this tariff decision will affect India's strategic autonomy? Because given Trump's criticism of its defense ties, our defense ties with Russia and energy trade amidst this entire Ukraine war.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maria. If you permit, I'll just make one or two comments on the discussions we've been having so far. I think having low tariffs is something like talking about motherhood and apple pie. Everyone says it's very good to have low tariffs. And it's not that India has said that we will not have low tariffs. We have stated we are going to have low tariffs. We have reduced tariffs on 90% of our goods that are coming from the United Kingdom. We have signed FTAs with Australia. We have signed FTAs with UAE. We are going to have an FTA with with European Union. With the United States, it was only a bilateral trade agreement. It was a mini agreement trade deal. It was not a full-fledged FTA. And there also, I think there was, comments have been made, we need to give priority, energy. I think we've been giving priority and energy. That is why Prime Minister Modi visited the United States on 13th of February, within a month of Trump taking over, because we are interested in this relationship. Our commerce minister, their commerce minister, they have come to India. We have tried to negotiate this deal. And there are a couple of items. All others, what I understand from press reports, they were resolved, but there were issues like, some of the agricultural products, soya, etc., that Mr. Trump is particularly interested. As far as dairy products are concerned, as far as GMOs are concerned, those are some of the red line issues on which we have stood firm. And I think what Mr. Trump has come out and the sort of language that he has used, I think it's both an unfriendly act and an unfriendly language, in terms of, obnoxious, and it shows the peak. He is trying to sort of, make a point. Now, coming to, the point, the last point here also is, it's not only that the penalty that he's talking about is ultra vires the WTO. It is, the coercion that he is using to reduce tariffs outside the ambit of the WTO. That is also ultra vires, because that is the platform. WTO is the platform where countries go to discuss and decide and negotiate tariffs. And we have negotiated our tariffs on different products, on different countries in the WTO. So we are very much in consonance with our international and global rights. Now, as far as, the question that you have put, I think it definitely does leave a bad taste in the mouth. But then that having been said, I'll make 2 points. Number one, our relationship with the United States is not based only on trade. There are so many other issues, whether it is technology, whether it is defense, whether it is our diaspora, whether it is, in terms of geopolitics, our cooperation in Quad and counterterrorism. So it's a huge spectrum of relations. So I think that we need to continue. We need to focus on how we can get out of this problem that Trump has put us in.
Okay.
Also focus very much on our FTA that we have signed with UK, have an FTA with EU also, without much loss of time, and look at alternative. I can understand it's a $86 billion trading relationship with the United States. It's a significant relationship.
Okay.
We need to preserve it, but then we need to go out also and look at other markets and other partners also.
Okay, I have just enough time for the last word to the woman on the panel, Ms. Prasad. What options does India have through WTO, bilateral diplomacy or counter tariff to respond to this?
Maria, you see, a number of options are available. As per the rules, number one, you can go and dispute against this. But then disputes take a long time to fructify, to settle, and you don't get what is called a temporary stay. So you might have to suffer whatever you will with this action. That is one. Second, you retaliate, have the guts to retaliate and say that if this is done unilaterally, we will be forced to do something unilaterally on the items that the US exports to India. But we need to actually take very studied action. We need to read the fine print. This has to come out as a notification It can't come out as a social media statement. We'll need to see what items get affected, how they get affected, whether at all we would be in such a lot of trouble, or in the medium term, we would be able to find alternative markets. So as for the rules, we can go to dispute.
Okay.
But do you want to take a dispute which could take years to settle?
That's right.
And yeah, and so it is always, the preferred option is always to talk across the table.
Okay.
What is called our Article 22 consultations, which are prior to taking a member state to dispute. So we can at the most start Article 22 consultations if we want to be very tough on the rules. But the ideal thing would be to sit across the table and talk it out.
All right.
The second point I really want to make is that this whole business about a bilateral deal is again outside the rules of the WTO. There's nothing like a bilateral deal that you can have, because whatever tariffs you reduce or increase would have to be multilateralized. That is one. You can't exceed your bound tariffs in any way.
Okay.
That is the second. So if you have space between applied and bound tariffs to play around with, and you think that you can, it's in your national interest, it's another matter. But to say that this will remain a bilateral deal, I really don't think so, because either you have an FTA, which is a derogation from WTO rules, which you can have just bilaterally. But this kind of a deal, which is neither here nor there, is certainly not going to be restricted to the United States.
All right.
The competitive exporters might make better use of it than the United States.
All right, Ms. Prasad, a pleasure having you on my show. Ashok Janhar, Gurcharan Das, Ajay Dua. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.